Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to the laser puzzle game ReThink. I exited out of the app and reloaded to get the help pop-up to go away. There is something weird as we're now at puzzle 11, and it definitely feels like this is funny how you have a half-height wall here right next to the receiver. You have this game that we pretty well know is going to be somewhat short. Like, we'll be lucky, I think, if we get past 50 puzzles. And yet we know in the ReThink series that there are at least 4 games that are all several years old now, and there are also several ReThink evolved games. It's interesting, the split here does not equate to another split, which could get complicated, certainly when they introduce the 30-degree splits. So it would be my assumption, and I am just going to call this an assumption with no real expertise around it, that any company, if they are properly doing business, is going to have to make a certain amount of sales each year. Wow, look at how much the graphics just pop in. Maybe that is in part why the graphics at Overkill may be just too much. But also, let's experiment with this a little bit. Field of view, shadows. That you would think that would be shadows. Let's see, field of view would just change things as far as how things look. And I could see lowering the field of view, but I think it's pretty good at its default of 90. Anyways, what I was saying before is that you're going to need a certain amount of sales each year to just kind of justify having an accountant, having a tax prepper. It doesn't make the most amount of sense if you're actually running your business correctly and not just not paying taxes, which I'm not accusing this creator of doing anything like that. But it makes sense that you're going to want a certain amount of sales, and that you would want to see your sales not just drastically decline after the initial 6 weeks, after the initial 6 months, after the first year, after the second year. So one way you certainly would avoid that kind of decline is by making your game cheaper, which is weirdly something that I don't really feel like ReThink is doing too much of that. You may get the occasional sale on Steam. But another way, certainly in the case of ReThink in particular, would be to make the game more of an offering. And one way you could certainly do that is by making more of a bundle, rebadging, relabeling the 4 games into one, re-releasing the games, remastering the games. Particularly when you have remasters of every single game and you have 4 games in the series, it would make some sense to try and label all of that, merge it together. Now, I will be completely wrong on this thought, this speculation, if it turns out that ReThink in itself actually has more than 50 puzzles, or it has 50 puzzles that are all very satisfactory, and thus the idea that there is any need for more is wrong. But yeah, there's a possibility there. It seems to me we're very quickly running into some level of complexity that I wasn't really expecting. I may literally just have to solve entire puzzles in weird ways. Yeah. We have one more receiver that needs to be lit up. I'm not 100% sure I even know where it is. It would probably be better if instead of just being a door, you did have a bigger divider between the sections. Although in Portal 1 and Portal 2 they had the elevator to have the loading of one section to another. And notably, I would say this game is actually doing way better of a job, way bigger rooms than Portal 1 had, and even Portal 2, for the most part, with its more complicated physics, with jumping and bouncing and having acceleration gel and bouncing gel. Okay. We need a purple beam to reach and go straight through. So what did we just shoot off? We broke a red beam. I assume this yellow beam is being used. Yeah. So we've got a red beam going this direction. We would need a blue beam. And the blue transmitter is here, so that's going to be tight no matter how we play this. Blue beam that way doesn't work. Blue beam this way does work. Interesting, you can stand on the platforms and raise them. Okay, now what, though? Yes, this is getting very complicated very fast. That's not going to do anything for me, that's not going to do anything for me, that's not going to do anything for me, that's not going to do anything for me. So we know, at the very least, this is probably right. Unless we're supposed to bounce it this way. And then split it that way. So that won't work. Need red beam still to go that direction, which maybe means we bring up this. Yeah. That's the move. Once again, we're just too far away from the door to hear the door sound effect when there really should just be speakers and some kind of sound effect played. There's also not any kind of flyover or anything to show you the solution, which this would highlight where a top-down laser puzzle game has an advantage instead of a first-person 3D puzzle game. So it's very possible that you could think the puzzle is not solved and then change something when it is solved. There is a solution clearly here that you could have all of the lasers retract once all of the receivers have been activated or lock, so you can't change them. But that's not the case. Yeah, almost certainly. Well, maybe they are locked. Nope, they aren't. So it might be helpful to have the doors locked behind you too, since this is supposed to be a prison. Even though you're being tested for release. Now we have an orange sign or a red sign for number 12. I'm getting more red visual themes. Everything has been blue before. But it doesn't so far feel like there's any danger or any extra challenge. A big glowing red X over this would be helpful. It's a shame that Valve has painted themselves into a corner and they can't make a Portal 3 without getting major complaints for not making a Half-Life 3, even though clearly the project's been mostly abandoned for decades, with Half-Life Alyx as a VR game kind of bringing it back, but not really. Because certainly you could have games like this made by Valve, and Valve churning out every year or two a somewhat small game would be way nicer than what they mostly do, which is to barely make games for most of the time and occasionally put out one weird game that doesn't make much of a splash. Or they put out a bunch of Counter-Strike updates which only affect people playing Counter-Strike, which, in all fairness, there are a lot of people who play Counter-Strike. Now, when I live stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on my channel, there's a point at which I try to keep myself informed as far as all the games that are coming out. And so I'll look at basically every game that comes out on Steam. That includes and creates a situation where I am looking at a lot of games, and a significant portion of them, I'd say 60, 70, maybe even 80% of all games that get released on a daily basis on Steam are absolutely garbage and not worth mentioning. But in the categories of garbage games, you will have what I describe as Unity asset flips, or low effort asset flips more often than not. Usually I don't exclusively say Unity as if I know for a fact it is coming from the Unity store versus, say, the Epic game store or any other game store. I cannot classify this game as a low effort asset flip game. it is pretty obvious it is flipping a lot of assets from the Unity asset store. But that helped someone who was at least somewhat creative to create a piece of art in a video game that actually does have some value. This isn't something that is just trying to steal your money, particularly since we know this is a Steam Greenlight game from 2017. We know then that the 2-hour no question asked policy of Steam wasn't even in play at that time. So if they were just trying to rip people off, they would have made 10 puzzles at most. You know, at this rate, we will play the game for at least 2 hours, and I wouldn't feel like there would be any real valid reason to demand a refund. See, this is funny because it seemed to me in the heads-up display that it was done and I could just run through the door, but when you actually look at the door, there's a loading bar that's not being represented in the heads-up display at the bottom right, and it really should be represented. This is effectively just a twist on one of the first puzzles we did, with slightly different placements. You definitely could make a low effort asset flip game version of the game where you've done very little and not made much of a game. I believe I just got the letter N of think as an achievement. And here we have a hex grid pattern, which was what I argued probably should show up when you walk towards the glass, so that you know that there's something there, because it's very easy to just walk up to this and think that you're just looking outside and there's nothing stopping you. The other solution certainly would have been to just have more of these crossbars horizontally to make you realize there's a bar, or have darkened panels at the bottom to highlight it while not blocking your view. And the skybox still looks really great, but it is pretty much just the same skybox. I don't think there's any Easter eggs or secrets from a specific angle that you could see. So this here is a barrier, and it needs to be powered to get the laser out of it. I still don't really feel like there's a reason for these lower sections other than they're visually distracting. Okay, let's start with the blue, and that's one thing. Then let's assume that the blue is going to go here and here. The purple, which then assumes that this is going to catch some diagonal red that way. See, yeah, it's just weird that there isn't a larger barrier. There probably needs to be some hallways or something. I would frankly even take text popping up on the screen as you walk in between hallways to just have a physical separator. Yes, it's nice that this is one connected facility, but it does create some weirdness where you could accidentally walk in here and think that this puzzle hadn't been solved. I could see that just turning the lights off in the room would save GPU processing and indicate that the room is done. Okay. So apparently this X, I see, is connected to this. So the symbols on the receivers now matter. All right. We go here. We go here. And then that just instantly solved the puzzle. If you were going to get really artsy, I would like, and see, this would be some interesting animation programming and just video game programming in general. I'd like it to take control away from me for a brief second, make it really fast, fly the camera so it is flying directly above the closest point on the closest laser line, and then follow the laser line down, and then randomly pick one in general and go all the way to the end. That would be some interesting visual cinematography. The other thing you certainly could do is, you already are programming in path tracing in this anyway, so take control of the camera and fly down in this direction, so at least you can see the direction. Or even when you solve it, just turn the character's attention towards the door to go. Those are all little things that can make a game easier, because there is just always this high amount of danger in any game that you'll hit a difficulty spike, particularly one that was just not intended by the makers of the game, because you're confused as to what you're supposed to be doing or where you're supposed to be going. Okay. So far, the way this game has worked with its rules has made it so that a split never at one junction never connects to another split at the other junction, or has very low likelihood of connecting at that junction. These purples probably can't do anything here with that. Which means probably I need to do this instead. This is going to take up a lot of these reflectors. There might be a solution to this puzzle that changes things around. So you might have to solve half the puzzle one way and then get back some of the reflectors. this one doesn't work. We really can't be that close to the end of the game, can we? Because then it would be strangely short, a strangely short point at which we actually start to use the three-way splitter and the chroma filter splitters. I don't know how this can do anything. It feels like this might just be a red herring. Let's try something different here. Let's see what happens if we split this. Yeah, it's gotta be like that, doesn't it? So there we've got the two purples unlocking for a while. Are we getting close enough though? I guess your last piece goes here, doesn't it? And so what happens is it switches between being blue and green, but there's always a blue and green between the two sources. And that's another door done. It seems thematically wrong that you're getting into these yards when the theme of escape is overall, although I guess it's more a theme of pardon if I am guessing what the story actually is. Notice how the cars are intersecting almost like laser lines. Maybe that's what we're supposed to be learning here, is how to remotely drive flying vehicles. But yeah, certainly in Portal 2, when you're at that post-credits and you are shown the main protagonist leaving the facility, that's a big deal. And it doesn't feel like this would be, leaving this facility would really be a big deal. It also kind of feels like you might just be better off leaning on a amnesia gimmick, not knowing why you're in this facility or why you're trying to escape, because at least that makes a little bit more sense than solving puzzles. Let's see. I believe some of the descriptions of the later ReThink games say you're training AI, which at least that makes some sense with these puzzles. At least on the face of it, that makes sense. Interesting, there's a whole corner here you can't hit. So putting a split here doesn't work at all. We have two receivers. One basically has to be here. But that two doesn't hit it. So then it has to be here. does feel like at some point here I'm going to end up just resetting the entire puzzle, which weirdly there is no reset button. It would make sense that you would be able to hold down the R key and just reset to the quick save that would have happened when you first entered these puzzles. Okay. Follow this path. And determine something. What are our options? Well, I shouldn't follow the path from the transmitters. I should follow the path from the receivers. Which, yeah, this spot here is just not going to be used. So we know it's that. And there's no more receiver here. So we know it's that. Probably means that is going that way. We just need to get the blue now to go through it also. The remaining of what we've got. This might be the first puzzle where we don't need all the pieces. Okay. So we now have purple. Satisfied. What did we do to lose the blue? We've got to. Stick it back that way. Okay. So now what do we do to get the green back? We just feed it back into itself. There we go. Might be nice if you had outdoor sections like this and every time you solve the puzzle it made holographic trees power up and they had leaves instead of being dead, which would have been a contrast. Then pretty much at any point, regardless of where you're looking, you would be rewarded visually for your solution. This is getting crazy as far as the amount of size, and at some level it's not going to be valuable to the player to have just giant areas that make you wander around quite a bit. Clearly there was a lot of testing and experimentation on how levels should be designed in Portal, and you're almost certainly never going to see that again to that level of polish. Although inherently that is part of the problem of Valve, isn't it? In that they have this opportunity to have infinite amounts of money from sales of other people's games on Steam that allow them to work on developing any projects they want to work on for way longer and for much higher of a budget than would be reasonable for most other game developers, particularly Steam Greenlight game developers. A lot of people certainly bemoan the idea of opening the floodgates and and getting rid of Steam Greenlight in favor of just a Steam Direct that allowed Valve to take $100 from anybody willing to take a gamble. And I think I'm probably somewhat in that same category of people. It definitely changed what it meant to put a game on Steam. It immediately eliminated any possible prestige you would have from either getting Steam Greenlight or going through the unfair process, but somewhat standard process of making a business proposal, getting a business loan, talking to a publisher to fund the development of your game. All of those things acted as barriers to entry for a lot of game developers, certainly, and was not very egalitarian. And Valve wants to be egalitarian, or at least use that as an excuse to have things like Steam Direct. But that barrier of entry also played vital roles on maintaining some level of quality as far as the games on Steam. Some small level of quality. And it also opened up a lot of floodgates once you introduced Steam Direct as a possibility around the games Valve still was either not legally able to list on their store or just used legalities as a reason to not list things on their store. Mostly that's adult content, which even that they've increased their openness towards adult content, but certainly there are plenty of games that are either forced to be censored or are just censored or completely disallowed on Steam. I don't fully get this. To have this lower tier puzzle happen, which really feels like this lower tier puzzle is just going to be completely disconnected from the higher tier puzzles. It'll maybe eliminate a few puzzle pieces, and maybe it will indicate that we need at least one split. I think we probably do. Feels like there should be some kind of mini map, since we've got a heads-up display anyways. Let's see. How can we get the symbols to hit that? I don't think we can without more splits. Yeah. And again, it feels like a reset button might be very helpful in these kinds of cases. Okay. So is that all we needed? Because now we kind of have to do some cleanup. Is that really the best solution here? Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a danger in this, that you could solve this multiple ways, and in solving it multiple ways, you could use more resources than you need. Yeah. So we bounced everything back to get a white light to this spot, to get down to this one split, to take those two splits that way. Still definitely feels like there could be one extra splitter that I've left on this lower section. But see, clearly that's just a separate puzzle. And so if you needed to bump the numbers up, why not make that a separate puzzle? Unless there was something I was supposed to learn from doing that puzzle that will help me in doing the rest of the puzzles. The remainder 3 here. Let's see what a split would do in those directions. I think inevitably we need a green and a red and a yellow and a blue in both directions. These cross over. Wow, we've gone long, so this will be the last puzzle for this recording. Okay. That split, it's this split, which maybe is needed, maybe isn't. But if it is needed, it doesn't need to go like that. Blue literally can only hit this one spot. So it either has to be bounced or split. And we may just be reinforcing light over and over again. Interesting that it works while you rotate it. Oh, and I guess you can just click on things to swap them, which that probably will be helpful. So let's see where this goes. This gives you a split towards that. But pretty obviously it needs to go in that orientation. Which then can bounce the light back that way. So everything is just going to cross. Okay. We have no more reflectors. So something here is wrong. It's got to be the green is wrong. I think. Blue and green is getting split in two different directions. This one is just hitting the wall. Though. Okay. If that's doing that, and that's doing that. And that's doing that. But didn't we already determine that this has to split in some direction? That's probably the direction though. That's blue and green that gets you turquoise, which then bounces that back this direction, which could bounce that back that direction. So we have one solution. Does this possibly go back that way? Well, that also would work. We didn't need the red to end up going here. But then what would we do with the red otherwise? Is there a single way that makes more sense than that direction? No, it just is going to hit the wall any other orientation. That seems right. And I can't just put this in one direction, which would just point that way. I would need another red transmitter to get to this white. Do have more to go, so it probably is helpful to just collect things. At least then it won't feel as hopeless. It almost feels like we're approaching a day-night cycle, but I imagine I'm just in the shade. Yeah. I could see integrating that with every puzzle. It gets a little bit later in the evening, and then you have a nice starry sky at the end. Okay, that, and that all look good. Whereas this isn't really needed. So would there be any value in having the splitter this direction? Well, it does solve that problem, and it does shoot off a laser in this random direction. Is there any other spin on this? Not really. So I would think that the move would be to go this way. Really don't have any other options. If the move is to go here, then what? Just doesn't really do anything. I can't diagonally hit that one. Could hit that. Maybe save some of that. I've really messed this up though. Yeah, I messed it up when I took the splitter away from this. It's just still no way that's not correct. Well, that might be correct. Yeah, we may very well get to a point where one puzzle takes well over 30 minutes. At this rate. Yeah, I definitely feel like a mini-map would be beneficial to this. And controller support would definitely be appreciated. The big danger certainly is that I used something here that I shouldn't have used. And that I need to get the one splitter that is down here back. I severely question though if that would really be the case. Yeah, I think that's just right. I may just need to take a break, but then I also don't want to solve these puzzles off screen. That's the entirety of this game, is the single gameplay mechanic of solving the puzzles. And in that, there's going to be some frustration on process of figuring out the solution. So green comes in here, comes out turquoise. We would need red to go that way to solve that one. So then it just really comes down to how do we solve this? It basically has to be hit by this one. And clearly this is the one we should focus on because we haven't solved that at all. And to be hit by that, you're either going to get a diagonal shot from there. Yep. That's literally the only thing that could happen. Alright, well, let's go borrow this one. And let's solve the top part first, since that would have been the first area we were in anyways. Basically has to be that. It doesn't have to waste the beam completely. Yeah. Since you can't do diagonals on diagonals, if I was to split the beam in this direction, it wouldn't hit anything. Alright, we'll have to take another one. Okay. What could hit this laser beam? Nothing. So the effort and the desire is definitely going to come down to sending this beam in that direction. We're getting the beginnings of something. If we put this one back in play here, so that still feels like that's the right move. What can we achieve with that? We can merge it. So now we have that lit up, and we basically don't want to change what happened there. So let me ask this question. If instead of splitting here, could I send the beam this way? No. So it definitely feels like in this game you should be able to just like lock things. Hit like a control left click to lock things in position. So this doesn't seem like it's doing anything. At the moment. So let's make an assumption that we're actually supposed to do some twistiness to do that. Now unfortunately, because you have certain angles here, this asterisk crossover is about the only pattern you'll ever see in the game. And yes, you could make that part of the logo of ReThink if you wanted to, but you're not going to get a large variety of interesting patterns. You can get an X, you can get an asterisk, you can get a diagonal line, you can get straight lines. Maybe you could get some combinations. Well, I'm not 100% sure what I'm supposed to be changing. It's probably pretty obvious that this should go back there. So that leaves me with two things that need to be solved. One here and one here. Okay. Where this is merging on this pattern. Maybe that needs to happen earlier, or maybe we just do that. Okay. So one thing is solved. Extra. Now we are simply short this here. Okay. So we return that, that doesn't change anything. We return that, that doesn't change anything. Rotate that, that doesn't help anything. I don't believe it can spin any other direction. But there's no way. Well, we did it. I didn't think I was going to do it, and I think inherently this is going to become the problem as we go deeper into the more complicated, far too large for their own good areas. This would be narratively, if I was creating a game like this, where I would like to see the trees disappear, either in favor of an empty spot, see the trees die, and or like dematerialize as if they were holograms, have something storyline cinematically happen there, maybe throughout the entire story imply that the facility is dying or shutting down. But if it were a case that there were less trees here, it would be a lot easier to see the puzzle. Yes, I know some of these trees are literally here to stop you from bouncing lasers and finding certain solutions, but I'd say the vast majority of them in no way could have blocked a laser. And undoubtedly having two puzzles treated as one is a mistake. But yeah, there is always this danger in puzzle games that you'll hit a frustration point and that it'll get too complicated, too repetitive, too recursive in the solutions, or have too many options. Now the good news for number 17 is it looks like there's only 10 single direction reflectors. Sorry, my mouse slid a little bit there, but it has now taken an hour for episodes that I was trying to make 30 minutes long episodes. So I've already doubled the length just to solve one puzzle, it feels like. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.